AITA for reminding my parents their golden child is their retirement plan. I am 34 now, so he is 32. But it is as if he never made it past the age of 16. He is the kind of guy who peaked in high school, or at least he would have if he had graduated. He dropped out in the middle of his junior year because he did not like being told what to do. That was always his excuse for everything: work, school, relationships. You name it. As soon as an authority figure gave him instructions, he would walk away. Meanwhile, I did everything right. I studied hard, got good grades, and worked part-time in high school to save up for college. My parents owned a small landscaping business with a few employees. It was not glamorous, but it paid the bills and kept the fridge full. They made me work with them during the summers, trimming hedges, mowing lawns, and hauling equipment. I hated it, but I did it because I knew it was temporary. I had bigger plans. Zach, on the other hand, would disappear in the middle of the day, claiming he did not feel like working or that it was too hot outside. My parents let it slide. He is still trying to find himself, they would say. Find himself? He did not even make the effort to start. After high school, things only got worse. While I was working 2 part-time jobs and taking night classes to earn my degree, Zach bounced between temporary odd jobs while living at our parents' house rent-free. He would get hired somewhere, whether a store or a delivery job, and a few weeks later he would quit or get fired because he did not like taking orders. Eventually, my parents stopped even asking what happened when he came home unemployed yet again. They would just sigh and say he would eventually find something that suited him. Obviously, that something never came. By the time I graduated and landed a job as a financial analyst, Zach was still living with them, borrowing money to start his own ventures or invest in some great opportunity. Nothing ever worked out. I would like to say I was surprised by how much they coddled him, but it had always been like that. If I got a B on a test, they lectured me for not trying hard enough. If Zach failed a class, it was the teacher's fault for not understanding his learning style. If I wanted new clothes, I had to save up for them. If Zach wanted new sneakers, my parents handed him their credit card without hesitation. It was like we lived in 2 completely different households. Despite everything, I tried to keep the peace. I came over for family dinners. I listened to my mother brag about Zach's intelligence despite all evidence to the contrary, and I nodded when my father talked about how Zach was on the verge of seizing a huge opportunity. It was frustrating, but I did not want to be the one constantly starting arguments. I told myself that as long as they did not involve me directly, I could leave them in their bubble. But even then, there were cracks. For example, the day I heard my mother telling a family friend that I did not need as much attention because I was self-sufficient, or when my father bluntly said that Zach had more potential than me because he was creative. Creative? The guy could not even manage a simple budget, but whatever. I let it slide. As I approached my 30s, I started to distance myself from them. I had not cut them out of my life yet. I was just doing my own thing. I had bought a modest house in the suburbs, put some money aside, and I finally felt like all my hard work was paying off. Meanwhile, Zach was still living at our parents' house, mooching off them and complaining about how hard life was. The worst part was that my parents thought this was normal. They even defended him. He is just taking a little time to find his way, my mother would say. Not everyone discovers their passion right away. Sure, Mom. He had been searching for over 10 years. But once again, I kept quiet. It was not worth fighting over. Looking back, I think a part of me knew how all this would end. My parents' favoritism was not limited to affection or emotional support. I just had not realized yet how far they would go. Last year, everything fell apart. Family dinners were something I endured rather than enjoyed. Growing up, I had learned that avoiding them only brought endless nagging. So about every couple of weeks, I would go, make small talk, eat what my mother cooked, and remind myself that it was just what a good son was supposed to do. These meals always followed the same script. My mother would call me earlier in the day to remind me to come, as if I had already forgotten. I would arrive and greet my father. He was usually slumped in his recliner, watching a game or an old action movie. Then I would chat a bit with my mother while she finished cooking. As for Zach, he was almost always already there, sitting at the table or on the couch, glued to his phone as if he had absolutely nothing better to do, which was probably true. The food was always excellent. My mother was a very good cook, but that did not make up for the awkwardness of those conversations. Most of the time, it started innocently enough. My father would complain about the traffic or the weather, and my mother would give me updates on people I did not even remember anymore. But no matter the topic, the conversation always ended up revolving around Zach. Zach is so busy with his business, my mother would say, as if she were trying to convince herself. Yes, he has great ideas, my father would add, as if he were talking about an entrepreneurial genius. I would sit there, chewing my food in silence, feigning interest. I had learned not to contradict them. No matter the facts, my parents were convinced that Zach was turning things around. Once, I made the mistake of asking for specifics. What ideas? I asked, genuinely curious. My mother glanced over at Zach, who was suddenly staring at his plate with intense concentration. He is talking about expanding into commercial contracts, office parks, shopping centers, bigger projects, she replied. Yeah, Zach mumbled, raising his head. That is ambitious, I said cautiously. I wanted to ask how he planned to do that when he could not even be punctual for small residential jobs. But I bit my tongue. From time to time, my parents tried to get me involved. You are good with numbers, Nathan, my father told me one night. You should take a look at the accounts one of these days and give your brother some advice. Dad, I do not think that is a good idea, I replied. Why not? You could help him. You are family. I looked at Zach, still glued to his phone, and shook my head. I already have my own work to take care of. Besides, Zach seems to have it all under control. My father fell silent, visibly upset. But I knew it was not over. These dinners were never just meals. In reality, they mainly served to keep up appearances. My parents wanted me there so everything would look normal, as if we were this big, happy, close-knit family. But the reality was far from it. Zach barely noticed me most of the time, and when he did, it was only to drop a sarcastic remark like, Mr. has a degree and a real job. He thinks he is better than me. Of course, my parents never corrected him. They would just pretend not to hear or, worse, laugh along with him as if he were making a joke. Once, I talked about a project I was working on and was pretty proud of. Zach immediately shot back. It must be nice to sit at a desk while other people do the real work. I looked at him, wondering if it was even worth replying. Yes, Zach, I finally said. Sitting at a desk is exhausting. You should try it sometime. My father cleared his throat, and my mother quickly changed the subject. Zach is thinking of hiring more staff for the business, she said, as if it were big news. Really? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Well, not yet, Zach cut in. It is just an idea for now. I felt like laughing. Obviously, it was just an idea. With Zach, everything was always just an idea. After dinner, we usually hung out in the living room for a bit. Zach would lounge on the couch, looking bored. As for me, I would sip my coffee while waiting for the socially acceptable moment to leave. It is not that I hated my family, but being there was like stepping back in time. No matter the changes in my life, nothing in that house or the people who lived in it ever evolved. The same conversations, the same dynamics, the same expectations. They still saw me as the one who did not need anyone, the one who always managed, the one who handled everything on his own. And Zach remained their golden boy, the one who had to be pampered and supported at all costs, even if he did not deserve it. Every time I left, I was drained. That house sucked all my energy. I would get in my car, turn up the radio, and take a deep breath, reminding myself that I no longer had to live in that world. But no matter how far away I got, I knew that in a couple of weeks, I would be back sitting at that same table, listening to the same conversations, and pretending everything was fine. So that day, it was supposed to be a Sunday dinner like any other. Nothing out of the ordinary, the same bland conversations, the same forced family charade. I just planned to come eat my mother's lasagna, endure an hour or two of Zach's sarcasm and my father's grumbling about the economy, then go home. Simple, right? But this time, something was different. The atmosphere fell off as soon as I walked through the door. My mother seemed nervous, and my father, instead of being slumped in his recliner like usual, was sitting at the table. Even Zach looked uncomfortable, which was rare since he usually acted like he owned the place. What is going on? I asked, putting my keys on the counter. Nothing, my mother answered a little too quickly, her voice higher than usual. Dinner is almost ready. Sit down. I frowned but obeyed and took my usual spot at the table. My father coughed slightly and exchanged a look with my mother, who gave him a small nod. Zach, sitting across from me, stared at his phone with sudden interest. Well, my father said in an unusually serious tone. Here we go, I thought to myself. I did not know what was coming, but it did not sound good. My father never started a serious conversation, except to complain or break bad news. We have been thinking a lot about the future, he continued, his hands folded on the table as if he were about to give a business presentation. Your mother and I are not getting any younger, and we want to make sure everything is properly set up. Okay, I said slowly, looking at them in turn. My mother took over. You know, the business, the house, our savings. We are trying to figure out the best way to handle the transition. Transition? That word immediately set off alarm bells in my head. They had never talked to me about this kind of topic before. I vaguely knew they had a plan for their retirement, but I had never asked questions because, frankly, it was none of my business. My father cleared his throat and paused. We are going to start stepping back from the business, and we have decided to transfer the business, the house, and our savings into Zach's name. I blinked. Everything. The house, the business, the savings, my mother clarified, as if she were speaking to a child. It makes the most sense. I looked at them, waiting for them to smile or say they were joking. But no, they were completely serious. Wait, I said, trying to process what I had just heard. You are giving everything to Zach? Yes, my father answered, as if it was the most logical decision in the world. Why? My mother tilted her head with that sympathetic look she had mastered. Sweetie, you do not need it. You have a good job and a house. Zach, on the other hand, needs more support. Support? I repeated. You mean the guy who did not even finish high school and who has never kept a job for more than 6 months? My father sighed, already annoyed. That is not fair, Nathan. Zach has had a harder time finding his way. We just want to give him a chance to succeed. A chance to succeed, I repeated, shaking my head. Succeed at what exactly? Squandering your money and sinking the business? Nathan, that is enough, my mother said sharply. No, seriously, I continued, my voice rising. You are giving him everything. And what exactly do I get? A pat on the back for being responsible? You do not need anything from us, my father replied in a firm voice. You have always been independent. Zach, on the other hand, could use a little boost. A little boost? They were handing over their house, their savings, their business, a lifetime of hard work to a guy who was incapable of paying his own phone bill. It was more than insulting. It was revolting. I looked at Zach, who had finally put his phone down and was staring at me with that smug smile. He did not say anything, but he did not need to. His expression said it all. Unbelievable, I breathed, pushing back my chair. Nathan, please, my mother said in a trembling voice. Do not turn this into a fight. We do not want to hurt you. We just think this is what is best for the family. Best for the family, I repeated with a bitter laugh. No, it is best for Zach. And when he ruins everything, because we all know he will, what will you do? You will come and ask me to clean up the mess. That is not fair, my father repeated, his jaw clenched. Zach is capable. He has been making an effort lately, and we trust him to handle this. Making an effort? By showing up to work a couple of times a week and scrolling on his phone the rest of the time? Yeah, that is real responsibility. Zach finally spoke up. You are just jealous, he shot back, his voice full of fake confidence. Just because they trust me does not mean you have to throw a fit. I burst out laughing in disbelief. Trusting you? That is a good joke, Zach. This has nothing to do with trust. They are just too blind to see who you really are. That is enough. My mother cried out, slamming her hand on the table. It was not often that she raised her voice, and usually it was enough to calm everyone down. But not this time. No, I said, standing up. It is not enough. You have made your choice. Fine. Give everything to Zach. Nathan, please, my father said in a softer voice. Do not leave like this. We are still a family. I shook my head. A family? No, Dad. A family is supposed to support each other. This support, as you call it, is just favoritism. Pure and simple. Without another word, I grabbed my keys and walked out. I heard my mother calling after me as I walked through the door, but I did not look back. The drive back to my house was one of the longest of my life. My hands were shaking, and my mind was racing. A part of me could not believe what had just happened, but another part was not surprised at all. They had always preferred Zach. It was just the logical conclusion to all those years of indulgence and favoritism. But knowing that did not make it any easier to accept. By the time I got home, I had made my decision. I was not going to let them drag me into this mess. They wanted Zach to have everything. Fine. But they were not going to use me as a safety net when it all fell apart. Not this time. After that dinner, I distanced myself. Not in a dramatic way, but calmly. I needed some space. I did not block their numbers, but I did not answer their calls either. They did not make much of an effort to reach out. So I figured this silence worked for everyone. The first few weeks were almost peaceful. No more forced conversations, no more evenings spent listening to stories about how great Zach was. I had my evenings and weekends back without the emotional drain. But that peace came with constant frustration. I kept asking myself the same questions. How could they not see how unfair this was? Did they really think Zach was capable of running a business? What was going to happen when it all came crashing down? I wanted to move on, but the anger was still there, bubbling under the surface. It was not just about the business, the house, or the money. It was a matter of principle. They had spent my entire life treating Zach like the center of the universe, and now they had taken that logic to the extreme. They had handed him their entire legacy without even pretending to include me in the decision. A few weeks later, I got some unexpected news. I was having coffee with an old high school friend, Ben, who still lived in the area. We were chatting when he brought up my parents' business. "So, how is the landscaping company doing?" he asked, stirring his coffee. "I heard Zach is running it now." "Yeah," I replied, trying to keep a neutral tone. "They handed everything over to him." Ben raised an eyebrow. "Interesting. I bumped into Joe the other day. Do you remember Joe? He has worked for your parents forever." "Oh right, I know who that is. What did he tell you?" Ben leaned in slightly. "Apparently, things are not going well. Joe says Zach is making bad decisions. He takes on jobs that are too big for the crew. He is underpaying the guys, that kind of stuff." I sighed. That does not surprise me. He has never known how to think long-term. Ben nodded. "Joe says your dad is still handling quite a bit of the day-to-day operations, but it is clear that Zach is in over his head." "That does not surprise me either," I murmured. "It is a shame," Ben said. "Your parents put so much of themselves into that business." "Yeah," I replied, feeling the frustration rise again. "And now they are leaving it to Zach, who is driving it straight into the ground." Hearing that confirmed what I already suspected. Zach was not cut out to run a business, and my parents were too blinded by their favoritism to admit it. As annoying as it was, I had no intention of stepping in. That business was their pride and joy, the fruit of their sweat and sacrifices for decades. And now they were watching it collapse without saying a word. A part of me wanted to call them and say I told you so. But another part just felt sadness for the business and the employees who were struggling to salvage what they could. After that conversation, I distanced myself even more. But it did not take long for the cracks to show. A few weeks later, I got a voicemail from my mother. Her voice sounded light, but I could hear the tension underneath. "Hi, sweetie, it is Mom. I just wanted to see how you were doing. Call me back when you have a minute. I love you." I did not call her back. Not because I did not care, but because I knew perfectly well what she wanted to talk about. Over the following weeks, I received more messages and texts from her, all with that falsely cheerful tone masking her distress. Zach, of course, never reached out to me. Why would he? He probably still thought he was the big boss, even as everything fell apart around him. For the first time in my life, I felt completely detached from my family. And you know what? It was not as terrible as I thought. I did not miss the drama. I did not miss the constant feeling of being the second choice. I did not miss the weight of their expectations on my shoulders. After weeks of silence, I thought they had finally gotten the message, but my parents were persistent, especially when it came to fixing Zach's messes. The next escalation came in the form of a long email from my mother. "Nathan, I know you are angry, but we are going through a very difficult time. Zach is under enormous pressure and things are not going as planned. He is doing his best, but it is a lot for him to handle. Your father and I are doing everything we can, but we are at our breaking point. Can you just talk to us? We need your advice. We need you." I was not the one who had put them in this situation. They had made their choice, giving everything to Zach without even consulting me. And now that it was all falling apart, they expected me to swoop in and save them. That was not my job. A few days later, I ran into an old employee of my parents, Gary, at the post office. Gary had worked for them for years, but he had left shortly after Zach took over. "Hey Nathan," he said, recognizing me in line. "Do you have a minute?" "Yeah." I replied, bracing myself. Are you aware of what is going on with the business? He asked in a low voice. I have heard a little bit about it, I answered. What is new? Gary shook his head. Man, it is a disaster. Zach does not know what he is doing. He takes on contracts way too big for the crew and slashes prices just to land jobs. He is barely breaking even on most of the sites. That does not surprise me, I said calmly. And that is not even the worst of it, Gary continued. He fights with everyone, even the good guys who were loyal to your parents for years. A lot of them have left. There is only a handful of workers left now. Why does that not surprise me? I muttered. Gary shook his head. I hate to say it, but if things keep going like this, I do not think the business will last much longer. Later that evening, I got another call from my mother. This time, I answered. Nathan, she said, her voice a mix of relief and frustration. I have been trying to reach you for weeks. Why have you not called us back? Because I know what you are going to ask me, and the answer is still no, I said straightforwardly. Nathan, please, she replied, her voice trembling. We are really in a tight spot. Zach is struggling, and we do not know what to do anymore. The business is collapsing. I am sorry to hear that, I answered, my tone showing I was not all that sorry. You have to understand, she continued. We just wanted to give Zach a chance. We thought he would learn to step up. Well, he did not, I replied dryly. And now you are suffering the consequences of that decision. It is not like that. It is exactly like that, I interrupted. I will not do it, Mom. I am done. She did not say anything for a moment, and I could hear her holding back sobs. Finally, she whispered, I just wish you would understand. We love you both, Nathan. We never meant to make you feel like you were not important. You did not mean to, I said. But that is exactly what you did. Over the next few weeks, I started getting calls from other people, relatives, family friends, even former neighbors. Apparently, my parents were telling everyone how much trouble they were in and that I was refusing to help them. One of my aunts called me, immediately launching into a guilt trip. Nathan, what is wrong with you? She said sharply. Your parents are struggling, and you are just sitting there doing nothing. That is not how a family works. They could not foresee what was going to happen, she continued. They just wanted to do what was best for him, and now they need you. Are you really going to turn your back on them? Yes, I replied simply. What kind of son does that? She snapped, outraged. The kind of son who is sick of being the backup plan, I retorted before hanging up. Meanwhile, the business situation was getting even worse. Zach, true to form, refused to take any responsibility. From what I was told, he blamed the employees, the customers, the economy, everything but himself. My parents, of course, kept defending him. He is doing his best, my mother said in a voicemail. It is just a hard time for everyone. But it was not just a hard time. It was a disaster. The business was bleeding money, and my parents were on the verge of losing everything. And even then, they could not admit they had made a mistake. One Saturday morning, they showed up at my house unannounced while I was enjoying my usual routine of coffee and peace and quiet. There was a knock at the door, sharp and determined. I opened the door and saw them on the porch. My father stood stiffly, looking both annoyed and exhausted, while my mother nervously fidgeted with her purse strap. Her lips were pressed into a thin line. For a second, I considered shutting the door, but I knew they would not leave without saying what they came to say. Can we come in? My father asked, though it was not really a question. I stepped aside. They did not wait for an invitation to sit down. My father dropped into the armchair as if he owned the place, and my mother sat on the edge of the couch, clutching her purse. There was a heavy silence. I remained standing, leaning against the wall, waiting for them to get to the point. We need to talk, my father said in a firm voice. Frankly, Nathan, we are disappointed in you. I blinked, taken aback. Disappointed? Yes, he replied. We have been trying to make you listen to reason for weeks, and you keep ignoring us. You are turning your back on your family, and that is not how we raised you. My mother nodded, looking pained. We expected better from you, Nathan. You have always been the reliable one, the one we could count on. But now that we need you most, you refuse to help. A wave of disbelief washed over me. They had not come to apologize. They had come to guilt trip me. We thought we raised you better than this, my father continued, his voice growing harsher. After everything we have done for you, after all the sacrifices we made, this is how you repay us. By ignoring our calls and leaving us to fend for ourselves. They went on, listing every so-called sacrifice they had made for me, how they paid for my childhood activities, supported my education, put a roof over our heads. My father talked about all the hours he had worked to provide for us and how he had hoped I would take over one day. And now, my mother added, her voice trembling, "You are not just turning your back on Zach, but on us too. We are getting older, Nathan. We cannot work forever. We thought you would understand that you would be there to help us when the time came. But instead, you are leaving us with nothing." And there it was, the real reason for their visit. They had always counted on me to be their retirement plan, their safety net, the one who would carry the burden when they could no longer do it themselves. I let them talk. I did not interrupt. I just listened with my arms crossed as they laid all their expectations at my feet, as if it were my fault their plan had crumbled. When they were finished, my father leaned back in the armchair and said in an icy tone, "You have made your position very clear, and quite frankly, it is disappointing." My mother sniffled and pulled a tissue out of her purse. "We do not deserve this, Nathan." I took a deep breath. Then, calmly, I answered, "You are right. You do not deserve to be in my house or in my life right now. You deserve to face the consequences of your own actions, just like everybody else. You decided that Zach deserved all the support, all the recognition, all the financial security. Fine. Then now it is up to him to help you." I stared them down. "And now look at you. You come to my house to get me to clean up the mess. That is not how this works." My father opened his mouth, but I held up a hand to stop him. "You do not have the right to tell me I disappoint you when you spent my whole life making me feel invisible. You do not have the right to guilt-trip me after ignoring me for years and making it clear that Zach was the only one who mattered. You made your choices. Now live with them." My mother burst into sobs. My father sat motionless, his face stony, but I could see the defeat in his eyes. They had come to shame me, and they were the ones leaving humiliated. A long silence followed. Finally, my father sighed and stood up slowly. "You are right," he said in a low voice, his shoulders slumped. "We made mistakes. We thought we were doing the right thing, but we were wrong. We should have done things differently. We should have treated you better." My mother sobbed. "We are sorry, Nathan, truly. We thought we were helping Zach. We did not realize." She could not finish her sentence. I said nothing. Their apologies changed nothing. They could not erase years of favoritism or heal the wounds they had left. "We want to make it up to you," my father said heavily. "We do not know how, but we want to try." I shook my head. "No matter what you do, it will be too late. It is over." They left a few minutes later, beaten and full of remorse. My mother looked back several times on her way out, as if hoping I would change my mind, but I did not. I was not interested in reconciliation under those terms. I needed time and space, and they needed to face the consequences of their choices. As for Zach, from what I have heard, he continues to blame everyone else. Apparently, he tells anyone who will listen that our parents sabotaged him by not supporting him enough, which is pretty ironic considering they gave him everything. Typical Zach. The good news is that I feel lighter now. Cutting ties was not easy, but it was worth it. For the first time in years, I am focusing on myself. I am traveling, discovering new hobbies, and finally living my life without carrying their burden. Comment. Hey everyone, this story really hit home for me. I've learned that protecting our peace sometimes means making hard decisions. Setting healthy boundaries is one of the most important ways we show ourselves respect. We can't keep giving endlessly when it costs us our own well-being. Taking responsibility for our happiness instead of waiting for others to change is truly empowering. Letting go of what drains us often creates space for genuine healing. Kindness is beautiful, but it should never come at the expense of our self-worth. I hope this encourages you to reflect on the relationships in your own life. You deserve to be surrounded by people who value and respect you. Choosing your peace and putting yourself first isn't selfish, it's necessary. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.